At the beginning of the year, I thought it would be prudent and useful for us to look at our values and give you a little bit of the background and the story of how we're doing that. So this is an introduction for that. So I'm going to lay out a little bit of the how and why. We're going to dig into the values and kind of share a bit of the story of how we've gotten to where we are now. Actually, our congregation is knocking on the door of 100 years in its existence in some form or another. 2025 would actually be the 100th year anniversary. And one of the things that's interesting about that is that the church, I'm reminded again and again that the church is not a building. The church is the people. And this congregation has been around in different buildings through those years. This building is about 30 years old, and on our leadership team we're dealing with maintenance things that are showing that age. But the congregation itself is approaching 100 years. Now, none of us here were around when that, for the beginning of that. But God is at work in a church and in a congregation and brings renewal and brings new people. And some move and some die and some things happen and whatever. But the congregation itself, this iteration of the Church of God in Wetaskiwin, has been around for almost 100 years. And as the congregation, that's you. You're the church. I'm the church. You're the church. We are the church together. Right? It's not this building. If we didn't have this building, would we still be the church? Yes. And so as a church, and I mean it as us, when I say that, I mean us, we are rediscovering and being renewed. We're being renewed day by day, year by year. The people who come, the people who stay, the people who are around and learning, as we learn and grow and learn to love each other and work together, we are continually being formed in the image of Christ together. And so I feel like it's important for us to explore what some of the values are for us as a community, as a congregation. Now, this goes back a couple of years. This is one of the questions that my therapist asked me back in the fall of 2020. Now, that was COVID. And we'd had lots of, for me, there was a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety in leading a church in that time. Lots of opinions and lots of ideas and conflict. Some of it was under the surface, some of it a little bit on the surface. But it was... There was a lot of stress and anxiety for me during that time, partly because of anticipating the departure of some long-term attendees of the congregation. And I had this uneasy feeling and just wondering what was going to happen and how it was going to happen and when it was going to happen. And so I sat with this discomfort and stress. I actually had a stress leave for a couple of weeks, where the therapist and doctor said, you need to, I'll write you the note, but you need to take a couple of weeks off because, I was already seeing a counselor. I was exercising regularly and actually in pretty good shape, and yet I was still feeling a level of stress and anxiety that was really, really high. And so my doctor said, I would really like to give you, I think you need a couple of weeks of medical leave. And so I took that, and I was trying to find stability in the midst of so many unknowns. What's going to happen next? What's going to happen with COVID? What's going to happen with the leaders in our church? What's going to happen with these families? What's going to happen in these relationships? Who's going to leave? How? When? And it was at that time that my therapist encouraged me to identify my values. He said, well, look, there's a lot of things outside of your control. These things you're describing. Other people are making decisions and doing things. Those are all outside of your control. But he said, what are your values? What are your values? He said, you need to work on identifying some of your values, because then you can evaluate your decisions and your direction based on your values and still be true to who you are, regardless of what other people are going to decide. And that will bring some stability. That will lower your stress and anxiety a little bit, because you can be true to who you are in the midst of all the other things that are going on around you. Well, that's not an easy thing to do. We often, you could probably think of big values, be like, yes, I value family, I value time with my children, or yes, sure. But what are your values? What are the things that drive you or motivate you? What are the things you're willing to sacrifice for? So we fast forward a few years to the autumn of 2022. Through that series from the fall of 2020 to 2022, we had a large migration of people that had left the church. And I do not call it a church split, because there was no single idea or single camp or single thing where we're on this side, we're on that side, we're out. There was a lot of people that left, but everyone had their own reasons. Some were similar, some were dissimilar. Some of the stragglers were just down to all my friends are gone. So, sorry, Pastor, all my friends have gone over there, so I think we're going to go over there too. Okay. But it wasn't really a church split. Nothing really blew up, but it was still really stressful. Part of the job of the pastor is to care for people. And, it's, I don't know, is that a job? Can you say that? I get paid to care for you? I mean, that's a little bit crass. It's true. It's not untrue, but it is more than that. It's a genuine caring, and I have a demeanor, and I do care. I do love you. I do care for you. And it's not because I'm paid to do it. But there is that element of it is a job to care for people. So when you have a bigger group, you care for the group. And part of what was so hard in that is that, 50% or more of the people that were here had migrated away. And it was so hard because I had spent years, now we're 10 years, but that would have been 7 years, 8 years, getting to know their families, getting to know their children, getting to be part of their lives. We did baby dedications, we did baptisms, we did weddings, I did premarital counseling, I did marital counseling. I knew these people. They're part of my life. I cared for them. I loved them. And so when 50 people or so, some of them were kids, I didn't know them all the same, but when 50 people that I've spent 7 years loving and caring for leave, for all the different reasons, it's really hard. It was really, really hard. Because you invest. You risk emotionally caring, letting people in. They let you in, you let them in. And so it was really hard. It took quite a while I'm still healing, to be honest, but I've come a long way. There's been a lot of healing from then. But I just thought, this is part of our story. It's part of my story. And it's part of what has led us to actually kind of a new church, a new congregation. We are now a congregation that has been kind of reset. Now, many of you who are here have journeyed with me, and you've journeyed this somewhat together. You've been here for that, and I thank you for that. Thank you for sticking with me. Thank you for sticking with us, for being the us that I had to stick with, that I had the opportunity to stick with it in the midst of this. But there was a time where I just thought anybody, everybody could go. I don't know who's going to stay, right? Didn't matter. The next day, maybe tomorrow. Person who's been here a long time, doesn't matter. Maybe tomorrow they're gone. And so, I began to pull back a little bit because I'd been burned a lot. A lot of people that I loved and cared for had just thrown the relationship out like it was nothing. That's what it felt like to me. It was really hard. But we got through that. And we made it to autumn of 2022. Again, we'd begun to get our feet back under us, have a leadership team come together again underneath And the church is still here. We're still here. God is still at work. And we began to have a little bit of excitement and some vision begin to just take root after the dust had settled from this. And I was gearing up for a book study. I still want to do it. We haven't done it yet, but I still want to do it. But as I was getting ready to promote this and share this with you and invite you to buy the book and do this journey together, I had like a halt. The day I was about to I was going to write it in the weekly email and outline everything for you and share it all. And it would start in a couple of weeks. But I just had like a real halt in my spirit that God was saying, no, don't do it. Oh. This was nothing bad. It was just there was a real stop put on that. So I spent the rest of the day, I talked with Leslie at lunchtime and said, I don't know quite what to do. I have these thoughts about it, and we brainstormed a bit together, and out of that came the idea that we should do something different. And part of what I was thinking, part of the stop was that if we do another group, let's say it was a Wednesday night book study again, it will be the same people who come, and it'll be the same people who don't come. And that was really more the significant thing for me. To say, the people who can make it, they've been coming, they've been faithful, they'll keep coming, they'll make it a priority, and they'll come, and we'll, and that's many of you who are, have been following the Lord for years and years and years, and you would grow a little bit from that study, and that'd be good. But I tell you, the people with kids, families with kids wouldn't come, because 7 to 9 on a weeknight just doesn't work. You have bedtimes. You have, what would we do for childcare? It just wouldn't work. The same people who wouldn't be there would not be there again. And I didn't like that idea. So that was part of it. Doesn't mean we're never going to do another book study or a study group or anything like that. But the idea of Refuel was born in that fall of 2022. And Refuel is what we called it, but it was basically community dinners. To say, what if we changed what we're doing? So instead of just having a Bible study on a Wednesday night from 7 to 9, what if we set a rhythm that people could join? That every week we would say, we're inviting you to join us for dinner every week at our house. Everyone's invited. Everyone can come. And we want you to all come. And we're going to set it the same day every week for a season, for 2 months. 8 weeks or 9 weeks. And then if you just look at your calendar and you say, is it Thursday? You don't have to say, is today the day that they're having the meal? You're if it's Thursday, the answer is yes. For those weeks, every week, at the same time, in the same place, we're gathering as the body of Christ, as the church, to do Refuel. And the hope was that it would be an opportunity for you to refuel. Not just with food, though that was part of it, but actually with fellowship, with friendship, with relationships, and getting to know one another. And one of the most encouraging things that happened, is that we did see families come. We did see kids come. And even in your busy routines, sometimes if all you can come is for a little bit to get a meal on the go and you got to keep going, that's fine. Come and go. But we wanted to make it as accessible as we could for people. And for families to get home so we said, okay, we'll go 5:30 to 7. And if you want to linger, you can. But if you need to go by 7, you can get home and get your kids to bed and start your routines, and that's fine. And it worked really well. So we had we developed some rhythms together in Refuel. And it evolved a little bit. We had an introduction. I would welcome people, and I would sort of lay out the night, and we'd have eating and a conversation starter at 6:30, and we got to know each other better. Actually, it was really encouraging because I'd see people sit down together with a plate of food, and they might have been here for 4 or 5 years, and another person for 8 or 10 years, and they'd sit down, and I'd hear them say, "And what do you do?" You're like, wow. I mean, That's amazing. That we actually are like connection is happening, right? It's happening. We've been here for years together. And if all we get is a Sunday morning once a week or a couple of times a month, we don't know what you do. We don't actually know each other. And that's something we wanted to change, and that's something that has been changing with Refuel. And so every week we would have a season, we would meet for Refuel and have these things, and we had then another season in February, March, and then another take a month off and have another season in May and June. And then this fall we started again. So as we did this, some values seemed to sift to the top. And so we review them every week at the beginning of Refuel. And we have them up on a little plaque over the fireplace. And people know because I ask every week, what are our 3 values? So I'll ask today, does anybody remember? Can you tell me what our 3 values are that we talk about our Refuel? Just if you know one, give me one of them. Contribution. What's the other 2? Connection. One more. Conversation. There we are. We got them. And we review them every week. And so the people who come know these, right? And they're like, oh, wait, I should know. And they get 2 out of 3 or 1, but we keep reviewing. And these are values that sort of like cream rises to the top. These values have sort of risen to the top out of this practice of Refuel. So connection, contribution, and conversation. And these are the values that we're going to explore over the next few weeks. And it's not meant to be the most comprehensive list, and you can have more than that. But I'm really glad you're here, and I hope you'll come and that you'll tune in if you can't come, because I think this is going to be a really important series for us as a congregation. As what I try to do is identify and lift out. These are the values that we have. I'm just putting a name to them, but we've seen these values at work in our midst in Refuel. And then what happened was, as the leadership team began to observe these too, we began to apply this filter to the other things we do in the church. And we say, well, we're going to have Car Care Saturday. How does this fit with our values? Actually, it fits really well. So Car Care Saturday, we do it at least once a year. And we have oil changes and car washes for single moms and widows. And so we invite people in from our community so that we can connect. We have greeters, and we have people who make baked goods, and we have coffee. So the people that come in, the women that come in, we connect with them. Some of them have been here every single time, 4 or 5 times they come back. So we build connection with our community. As we serve together, we build connection. We have contribution as part of that. We need you. We need people to volunteer for that. We have volunteers to help change the oil. We have volunteers to help run and get parts. We have volunteers to help vacuum cars and wash cars and clean and set up and tear down and order pizza and bake goods. And everybody gets to play a part. They contribute something to this event. And that's so important. And so we practice the value of contribution. And then conversation. Conversations happen as people are washing the car together or waiting for the next car. People are connecting from the church that are serving. People are connecting here inside with the moms and the kids and the people who are coming that we serve. Conversation begins to nurture these connections. And so we found, oh, wow, we already have this value. Oh, we did this trunk and treat as well. Same thing. We find these values are there in the midst of the events that we're doing. What about the used toy drive? Again, connection with the community, contribution and conversation. These values are, and so I didn't create these values. I'm just sharing these as I've observed these in who we are and what we do and who we're becoming. And so I'm putting a name to them. And I'm sharing them with us as a group, as a congregation, so that we can say, hey, actually, this is what we're about. This is who we are. And the values that sort of were identified out of Refuel have emerged and been changing our whole church culture. And I don't know if you've noticed that, but actually the warmth of our interactions on Sunday mornings have been turned up in a whole new way, and I think a welcoming way, because we are connecting on Thursday. And so when you come to church on a Sunday, even more than ever, you're greeting friends. Hey, how did that curling match go? Or I don't even know what you call it really yet, but how's your dog doing? How was the surgery? How was that thing you were undergoing? We actually know and care about each other because we chatted on Thursday and we had a conversation starter and we're getting to know more about each other and care. So these are the values, and I'm inviting your engagement with this too, to say well, maybe there are more, but these are three that have sort of unquestionably, for me, risen to the top, and the leadership team. And we begin to evaluate then, as we go forward, when we consider doing something else, we say, well, how does this fit in with our values? And in some ways, it's a bit of a snapshot of where we are. And I want to give a voice to this so that you can understand sort of how we've been growing, because we are a living and active congregation. And as people come and people go and different things happen, God is forming us. And so I think it's a great time, if you've been here for a long time or if you're new in our midst, this is so good for you to be here at this time, because we're helping to frame out what are our values. And what that does for us is it clarifies our identity. The goal for this series is that we would be clearer about who we are. Some of it is who we are in Christ. Obviously, that's a primary call for a Christian, to be identified as a person in Christ. But this clarifying our values, just like for me when I was going through that really difficult time of transition, and my counselor said, hey, if you can identify your values, you can be true to who you are, regardless of what other people are doing. And I feel that's the same for our congregation, that if we identify our values, one, it gives you a good idea of who we are. And if you're new or considering joining or coming and being with us, you'll have a clear idea of who we are and what we're about. It also makes it good for you if you have friends who are saying, I haven't been to church forever, but I've been thinking about it. And you ask them a question or two. Well, what are you looking for? Well, I was looking for a big band with an amazing vocalist and, tons of lights and smoke. And you're like, oh, this is the place for you. These candles hardly work at all. Pastor Nathan screams when he's behind the mic, and it's quite live. We have electrical fires, and the smoke is amazing. No, but, actually you say, well, maybe this church isn't for you. Now, I'm never saying, don't invite someone. But, when you listen to someone describe what they want or what they're looking for, you'll have a good idea of knowing whether or not this is a good fit for them. And I think when you know what our values are and you're able to clarify and identify we have a church identity, and we embrace these things, then you'll be able to have a clearer picture of what you're inviting people into. And you'll hear that in your conversations. You'll hear someone say, I've been here for 5 years in Wetaskiwin, and we haven't found anybody to connect with. We haven't found a community to be a part of. I tried this. I tried playing hockey, but I injured my knee. I tried joining the pickleball group at the drill hall, but, they were too aggressive. I don't know. I tried joining the knitting group at the museum, but whatever. They met it during my nap time, or I don't know what it is. But maybe they've been looking for connection, and you say, why don't you come to Refuel? We have a meal every Thursday, and, just come and bring a bag of ice or a bottle of juice or something. Come and join us. We got some great people there. Maybe that's a place for people to connect. I don't know. But you'll have a better idea of kind of who we are and who we're becoming and why. When we clarify our values, that's what it does for us as a congregation. And it also clarifies who we are not. So when you hear people say, well, I'm looking for this, maybe even it's not verbally, but you're like, that's not us. And that's okay. And the reason I say that is because initially, when somebody says, I don't share your values, it can almost come across as offensive. Because we could say, well, what's wrong with my values? And I actually had that. In the event of, through the migration that took place, I had sent an email to someone, to a couple, to make sure that I hadn't done anything, if I needed to ask forgiveness, I was willing and able to do that. And I wanted to reach out and clarify that. And they assured me, no, there is nothing there to forgive, don't worry about it, but we just don't share your values. And I was like, oh, really? Well, I was a bit offended. I'm like, well, what do you think my values are that are so repulsive? What are these values that are so unshareable that sorry, we don't share your values? Again, this is my interpretation. I don't know what the tone is, but I found that sort of hard to swallow, and that's a little bit of my people pleaser. Well, what's wrong with me? Why don't you like me? But the reality is, I'm like, well, that's okay. It's okay if somebody doesn't share our values. Actually, here's a secret. Many people don't share your values. And if you don't even know what your values are, how do you know whether or not they share your values? But don't get offended just because someone says, oh, I don't share your values. Again, pretty hard. What do you think my values are? Like, what are these offensive values that I'm carrying that are, Anyway, let it go. But I think it's important for us to know as a church congregation, as we do this, there's going to be actually people who are like, yeah, I don't want that. And just so you know, as the leader, as the pastor, I'm okay with that. Actually, if you can clearly know that up front, it's way easier. It's way easier than you coming and being like, oh, I really like this, and then sometime in being like, wait a minute. The Church of God believes that women are allowed to preach? Hold on. I didn't know that. Maybe this isn't for me. Wait a minute. The Church of God doesn't believe in the rapture? Oh, hold on. Wait a minute. And there's been times in the past where these things have happened. They've divided, and you know what? That's okay. We just want to be clear about who we are and what we do and why we do it. And so part of the goal of this series is that very thing, to clarify our identity and purpose. Now, please, for those of you who have been here for some time and are wading into our community, don't hear this as an ultimatum. I welcome your input and feedback and dialogue and questions, and I want to engage in conversation with you. Because we do come from different backgrounds, and you maybe grew up in a very different church and have questions, well, why do you guys do this or not do that? Or why do you value this and not that? Or what's your stance on this? Fine, please come. I welcome that conversation. But that's my goal with this series is, number one, to clarify our identity and purpose. Who we are becoming, okay? This isn't static, it's a becoming. But the second thing that I want with this to accomplish is to increase engagement. I want to go back to James. We just went through the book of James, and we studied through that in the fall. And the verse that came to mind was in chapter 1, verse 22. And James writes, "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says." Or, become doers of the word. Become doers of the word. Don't just listen. And I think that part of us, if we're honest, part of church culture is very easily and it's part of the consumerism that gets brought into the church. But part of that means, well, what are you giving me? I can change the channel at home, When I've heard enough, let's go to the next one. And we have so many things we can choose from, and quick delivery, and YouTube, and Prime, and Netflix, and all these things, and we just choose so much. But in the church as well, we have this idea that, well, I'll just move on. Sometimes people church shop or church hop or whatever you want to call it. And if all we are is hearers, then we've really missed out. We've missed out on God. We've missed out on God. And our discipleship is quite stunted. Actually, maturity, a growing Christian, grows in faith. And one of the tools God uses to help grow our faith is active engagement in the church, in ministry, in outreach, in volunteering. So maybe you're on a cleaning crew. Awesome. Maybe you're helping with our outreach events. Awesome. Maybe you do reading for Advent or help with music or help in the sound booth or whatever. There's so many different things. And it's not just to be inner looking, but it's actually the idea that Jesus served. And Jesus, at the end of his life, kneels down and washes the disciples' feet and gives the model of what a leader should be. And a leader should be one who serves. And it's actually a core piece of discipleship because we're called to be disciples who make disciples, not just who listen and hear and more engage and listen and listen and listen. Actually, the goal of understanding our values is that throughout our congregational life and worship, it will improve. Actually, you will have a better experience of this church if you're engaged at some level. As little as or as much as you can offer. And I'm not saying you can't be here and not do something. You can. We have space for that, right? I don't know where you're at. Maybe you're in a season of church life where you're like, you know what? I just need to observe for a while. Fair. But maybe you've been here for a while and you say, I don't really want to engage in anything and I don't want to. Fair. But what's going to happen as we talk about our values and as we implement our values, you're going to have more and more and more a sort of a feeling of discomfort because you say, oh, this church values contribution. And they're not talking about money. Actually, I could do that really easily. They actually want me to care. They want me to show up. They want me to serve. They want me to, well, I don't know. And I'm not saying all of you have to jump in, do the same thing. There's plenty of space for grace here. But I'm just saying, as we value this, I think it's going to increase engagement. And it's not just so that I have a church that's nice and active and doing, that I'm the pastor and like, hey, look at all these people I direct, No, it's actually for your own good. Your faith grows as you choose to engage. And here's what happens. Here's a little secret. Everybody who has ever stood on a stage in a church has at some time felt, I am not adequate. I am not qualified, and I shouldn't be up here. And what if I make a mess of this? And what if I make mistakes? What if I sing the wrong notes or play the wrong notes? What if I say the wrong thing or read the wrong word? What if the lighter doesn't work when I'm trying to light this thing? Everybody. What if I run the sound booth and I miss a slide? Everybody who's ever served in any way in the church has this idea. What if? Oh no. But the truth is, when we step outside of our comfort zone and we rely on God and God shows up, our faith grows. Actually, what comes to mind is working with Gary in Guam. We had a funeral because we lived near a cemetery. So sometimes when people were unaffiliated with the church, they'd call Gary's office and they'd say, hey, would you be willing to do this funeral for a person, they're unaffiliated, and they need someone to do their funeral. So Gary would say, yeah, sure. And one time he called me and he was like, Nate, I think you should do this funeral. And I was like, no way. Not doing it. I was a youth leader. I didn't do funerals. He's like, no, I think you're good. You could do this. I was like, no way, man. I have never done a funeral. And I don't even know these people. How am I have no frame of reference. No, I can't. And so he acquiesced to my panic. And he said, okay, what if we did it together? So he came with me or brought me with him, and we went and met this family, cold called, didn't know them from Adam. met them, talked with them, and I watched how he interacted with them. We listened to their story. We drew out some details. We worked with them, and I observed all of this and paid attention. And then he wrote the service and kind of told me how he was doing that. And he said, I want you to do the interment. So I'll do the service that we have at the chapel, and then when we go to the graveside, that'll be yours. And so he walked me through that. And so we did, and we shared that funeral, the whole thing together, and then afterwards went out for Chinese food and had a bit of a debrief. And it was really, really helpful. And having that mentor, the apprenticeship type of exposure really helped. So the next time that I had a funeral, I didn't have zero experience. I actually had some experience, and it was a good one. So I want to say also, as we call you to service and invite you to contribute, please, if you have ways that you would like to contribute and we're not currently facilitating, let me know. Maybe there's something you can do. Light a candle. Read a scripture. But there could be something else that we ask you to do, and your first reaction is, but I will always say, pray about it. It's the pastor's trick. Shouldn't tell you that. Pray about it. See what God lays on your heart. Because the reality is God might be calling you to serve or engage in a new way. And yes, it might be scary. But I also want to help apprentice you like Gary. And walk with you and say, hey, what can we do to help lower that anxiety? How can I help you? How can I equip you? But I think the idea, again, back to the reason why I think this series is going to be so important, is because it will clarify our identity and purpose in a fresh way, and it will increase engagement. And actually, that's part of the marker that I'm excited about. I'm really excited about that week for contribution, because I think it's a real distinctive in our church. And I think if this is one of the values that we begin to lift up, and we begin to live out as the priesthood of all believers, there's a little teaser for you, I think the church is going to be radically changed. And the love that you will have for this congregation and the way that you will see what God is doing in our congregation is going to change. And you're going to be like, man, I love my church. And it's not this building, it's the people. Amen. May we be more than hearers of the word, but may we become doers.